The last two Saturdays, we have been focusing on mental health. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for coming, and for those that are joining us online as well. Really quick, just commenting on the verse that Angie had us memorize. It said, keep your heart, right? Well, in the Bible, the heart is the mind, and we know that from Proverbs where it says, as a man thinketh in his heart. We don't think with our heart, right? With the organ of our heart. But that's what the mind is called in the Bible. So it's guard your mind with everything you can. Make sure that you protect your mind, because out of it, from the mind is the source of life. So we've been talking about mental health, and as we talk about mental health, I'd like to show you a few things from here. That we are having a mental crisis in our world. Prior to COVID-19, the pandemic that we were having was mental health, a mental health crisis. And I just like to show you guys a few statistics. By the way, I just want to let you know that none of this is my original work. All of it either comes from the World Health Organization, from the CDC, or I got another one from nutritionfacts.org and the National Institute of Mental Health. And yeah, but I'll give the references up here, and one book called Depression: The Way Out. So I want to show you though from these sources. So I'm not going to be giving every reference after I give. I just want you to know that for the record, that this is the sources of the information that I'm providing. So from 2013 to 2030, the World Health Organization decided to attack mental health. And they called upon a meeting, and they made a booklet, over 200 pages, on how to go about and conquering mental health, because it was just such a big problem. They appealed to world leaders, governors, influencers, anybody that was famous, powerful, and with money. They gave them a plan. Here's a plan that you can follow so that we can solve this mental health crisis. Now, here's where it says that they're urging mental health decisions to make, for lawmakers, advocates. Let's take action is what they're asking, right? So I want to blow this up. Maybe you can't see it, but so I want to blow this page up, and I want you to see what it says. In 2019, nearly 8 billion people, including 14 of the world's adolescents, were living with a mental disorder. So 8 billion people. You know how many people we have on this earth? 8 billion, right? 8 billion. So look at that. 8 billion people were struggling with a mental disorder. Suicide accounted for more than 1 in 100 deaths. In other words, every time 100 plus people have died, one person has committed suicide. 58% of suicides occur before the age of 50. Mental disorders are the leading cause of disability, causing 1 in 6 years lives to have disability. You might not be aware, but today in the U.S., the number one killer, the number one problem worldwide for death is heart disease. That's also the number one for causing disability. Now we are when it comes to depression, it's the number two in the world that's causing disability, in the United States. So people with severe mental health conditions die on average 10 to 20 years earlier than the general population, most due to prevalent physical diseases. Anyway, I want to skip down, and I want you to see what it says. Depression and anxiety went up more than 25 in the first year of the pandemic alone. So we were already having a crisis, a mental health crisis, before 2019. And then after 2019, after the pandemic, it got even worse. Here's the next thing that I want to show you. Here's from that booklet, that magazine that they sent out, World Health Report made by the World Health Organization. Notice what they said. About 1 in 8 people in the world live with a mental disorder. So if you were to count, if we're in the mall today, right? So if you were to count in the mall, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, mental health disorder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, mental health disorder. This is worldwide. I'm going to just read a little bit more in the bottom, as you can see. In both male and females, anxiety disorders and depression disorders are the most common. It says globally there are 20 suicide attempts for every death. So every time one person dies, 20 people have tried to commit suicide. Can you imagine that? And yet suicide accounts for more than 1 in every 100 deaths. It is a major cause of depression, the major cause of death among young people. So one of the major causes of death among our young people is suicide. You know, I was looking at some of the statistics. It's so sad that kids today are committing suicide as young as 5 years old. Can you imagine that? 5-year-olds. How do you even think about that? Continuing, National Alliance on Mental Illness. We're not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to read these facts here. I'm going to blow them up for you guys to see. We already saw this, that 1 in 5 adults, this is in the U.S., not worldwide, but 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness each year. But what I want you to see is here, suicide is the second leading cause of death among people. Look at this, age 10 to 14, the second leading cause of death. It's not a virus, it's not a disease, it's not a sickness, it's suicide. And that's a very young age, preteen, right? 14, starting to go into the teens. But preteens, they're already struggling with that. In 2019, 1 in every 8 people, or 970 million people around the world, were living with a mental disorder, and anxiety and depression being the most common, right? I want you to see this. Initial estimates show that 26 to 28 increase, respectively, of anxiety and major depression. So depression went up 28%, and anxiety went up 26%. What I want you to know is that this does not discriminate anyone, your race, or who it is, right? Many people also experience stigma, discrimination, so on and so forth, right? But I want you to see that it doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how much education you have. Mental health can still affect you. So I want to talk about what are the 8 factors. I was able, from all the data that I got, I was able to summarize it into 8 categories, the things that are causing mental health disorders. And because depression and anxiety tend to be the ones that are more prevalent, more common, those are the ones that I'm going to focus on for today. So I'm not going to be focusing like on schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or anything like that, even though with bipolar you do have manic episodes, which are types of depression or very happy feelings, right? But here are the ones that I want to talk about today, and I'm only going to be able to get to a few. I'm going to try that we have this whole month to the end of November to try to cover as much as I possibly can. But if you know the factors for depression, then you should also know the solution. I'm going to try to not only give you the problems, but also the solutions. And I don't want to focus so much on the first one, unchangeable factors, because most people, when they see this one and they're like, man, one of the factors is unchangeable, they get this victim mentality where it's like, well, I can't do anything about it because, hey, I can't change life, right? I can't change these things about me. So I don't want to focus on this because if you look at it, it's only 1 out of the 8 factors. I want to explain something before I go on. Look, instead of thinking, well, I am part of this part right here where I can't change anything, you should think I still have 7 other things that I can do to change my fate when it comes to depression or mental health disorder. Before I continue, I want to explain something to you. When you look at this phone has a hard, let's say the outside, it's made of aluminum or some type of metal, right? Some type of material. It has a glass in front of it, glass on the back. It has a light. This is the computer. This is a laptop. And this laptop, it's also made of aluminum or some type of metal, right? That's what we call the hardware. That's the brain. The brain is an organ. But what you see, what it displays when I push the on button, it displays time, it displays notifications, it has certain things that you can look on your apps. That's not the phone. That's what we would call the software, right? What you see, the things that's being displayed, that's the software. And that's what we would call the mind or the thoughts. So there's a difference between what it produces and then the organ. The organ itself is the brain. And many people, when they look at mental health, one of the things that they look at is just the brain. Now, there's a problem, just the mind. There's a problem with the function or what it's producing. But today I want to tell you that instead of just looking at it from the mind or the product, you have to look at the organ itself, the brain. So we're going to be talking about brain health, because if I were to drop the computer and I were to break the screen, it'd be very hard to see the software, what it's producing, the app. And so one can have an effect on the other. So that's what I want to talk about today. I really think that there's so much information, I don't think we're going to get to most of them. We're going to get to 2. But I'm only going to touch a little bit on the unchangeable factors. So genetics. What I'm happy about this is that there's not a depressed gene. In other words, there's no research that shows that you have a depressive gene. No. Genetics, you need several types of genes to end up that are kind of malfunctioning that lead to depression. So it's not like a hardcore scientific fact that there's a gene for depression. But you can have age. Like there's this you cannot change. If you're born with some type of gene that's a little bit off, you can't change that, right? Your age. When people are going through their teenage years, through puberty, or maybe at the end of their life, maybe at the closer to the end, let's say like when women go to menopause, you can't change that. You can't say, hey, I don't feel like being 14 or 15 or 16 or 18 or 19. No, you still have to go through that stage. And so this can be a factor that will increase your risk for depression. Gender, women tend to struggle more with depression than men. Ethnicity. Saw a report yesterday that white Americans have the highest risk for depression. After that is African Americans. After that is Pacific Islanders like Hawaiian and Filipinos. Then it's Latin or Hispanics like myself. And then Asian. Aren't you guys happy? Asians have a lower rate of being depressed. Now, this is in America, but you guys should be happy about that. Someone should say amen, right? Ethnicity, that's the one I just covered, right? History of depression in adolescence. Now, here's a statistic, that if you struggle with depression when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever, you're more likely to struggle with depression in your older years, in your adult life. So family history. So if your mom or your uncle or your dad, if you know your grandfather had depression, you're more likely to struggle with depression or a mental health disorder. But remember, these are things that you can't change. You can't change the past. You can't change your gender. You can't change your age, your genetics. You can't change the ethnicity, or if in the past you've had depression. You can't change that. But what you can change, what I want to focus on, things that we can change. And these other things, these other 7 factors, we do have an ability to change. So you're not fixed, is what I want to tell you, okay? Amen? I'm going to think amen for that. Amen. All right. So let's look at some of the diet-related factors that I want to talk about. So here are the things that can help you to promote a better health. In other words, better mental health, and help you to fight off depression or to prevent depression. Serotonin is number 1. Omega-3 fatty acids, folic acid, vitamin B12, animal protein. We're going to be talking about animal protein and early puberty, okay? So let's look first at serotonin. Serotonin, it acts like a neurotransmitter. It's something, how do I say it in an easy way? It's the part that helps the brain to send messages from one part of the brain to the other part of the brain, okay? That's what it does. That's one of the main functions. And an imbalance in serotonin can affect your mood, which can lead to depression. So if you have a lack of serotonin in your brain, it can lead to depression. It can also lead to obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, panic, and even excessive anger, just by lacking serotonin. So many people, when they struggle with certain things, I'm angry or I'm depressed, the first thing that they want to do is they want to take Prozac. But why not just go ahead and try to increase the serotonin in the brain? I'm not saying that we shouldn't be taking certain medications. I'm saying that this is a natural chemical in your brain that if you were to increase it, it can help you in so many different ways. Obsessive compulsive disorder, it's another one. So here's the thing though. Serotonin is not found in any food or any supplements. The body itself makes serotonin. So you can't go and say, hey, I'm going to go buy myself a kg of serotonin and just take it every day. That's not how it works. But on the contrary, the body makes it itself. It's naturally produced in the body, but you have to find it in raw materials. What do I mean? In other words, you can't find serotonin, you have to convert it. You get something called tryptophan. You eat foods with tryptophan, and then tryptophan will help the body produce serotonin. So the key is not looking, where can I find serotonin? Where can I buy a kg of serotonin? The key is to eat foods that are high in tryptophan. So you might be thinking, what in the world is tryptophan? Tryptophan is simply an amino acid. It's a protein building block, if you would. It's just a protein building block that you can find in food. So I listed a few things, some of the foods that are highest in tryptophan. Tofu. How many of you guys like tofu? Yeah, tofu is high in tryptophan. So when you eat tofu, it has tryptophan. Your body takes in the tryptophan, and then it converts it into, or produces serotonin with that tryptophan. Grounded flaxseed as well. So flaxseed, why did I put grounded? Because if you take flaxseed, it has a hard shell, and if you were to just eat flaxseed, it's going to come out the same way that it went in. So you must ground flaxseed before you take it if you want to get the tryptophan or the benefits. Roasted pumpkin seeds, gluten flour, sesame seed, and almonds have tryptophan. Now, notice that I didn't mention beef steak or chicken breast or salmon or whole milk. Now, these do have tryptophan. But why didn't I mention these? The reason why I didn't mention these, it's because it's not just I need to eat food that has tryptophan. Remember that I said that tryptophan is an amino acid. Well, there's 5 other amino acids that compete with tryptophan to get into the brain. And when you're eating food that has tryptophan, but it's higher in these 5 amino acids, it actually stops. It competes and it suppresses the tryptophan from getting into the brain. So the key is to eat food that is high in tryptophan but low in those 5 other amino acids, and these are the ones that I named here. So many people are like, well, I'll just eat a steak. Well, you're still not getting the benefit that you need from your tryptophan. Is that clear? Did I lose anyone? So the key is not just eating tryptophan, it's eating tryptophan with lower amino acids, the other 5 amino acids, because they'll compete to go to the brain. So that's why I don't promote these if you're struggling with depression or just in general. What about omega-3 fatty acids? Omega-3 fatty acids, if you lack, like when my wife was pregnant, I got her some omega-3, some flaxseed oil. And the reason for that, it's because when the baby is lacking omega-3, it's the part that develops the front part of the brain. People that lack omega-3 have problems with what we call the prefrontal cortex, or the what is it called? The frontal lobe, the front part of your brain. It's where you make decisions, your mood is at. It's well, actually not your mood, but where you make your judgments, your religion. And a lot of people are lacking omega-3 fatty oils. Well, how do you find it? Flaxseed. Once again, it has to be grounded flaxseed, right? Flaxseed oil or flaxseed just grounded. English walnuts, wheat germ oil, and green soybean. So you know that if you go to the market or the pasar, you're going to get the dry soybean. That's not the one. You have to get it green. I think you guys call it edamame here, right? I just know it as soybean. In the U.S., when I would buy soybean, it was just green. And I would just eat it like that. But you guys call it edamame. So that one is high in omega-3 fats. Now, why didn't I mention tuna? I think that people know that probably the most famous one is the pink salmon. And now, why did I name salmon or freshwater bass or rainbow trout or anything like that? Well, the reason why, it's because I think many people promote fish for omega-3s, but we're going to discuss maybe in a different presentation that you want to get. Here's the principle, okay? Our point is to get the benefit without any side effects. Let me digress for a little bit. I was in the U.S. and I was watching a commercial. And it said that if you have a sinus issue, I was watching a commercial and it had a very blurry screen. And then the promotion was they take out the blurry part of the screen. And the screen was very vivid with nice colors. And they were trying to say that many people that have allergies, sinus infections, they live like that. Life is just blurry. They don't feel like doing anything. And so they say, take this pill. And they're promoting their pill. And then in their pill, on the commercial, they talk really fast. And it says side effects include. stroke, dizziness, diarrhea, vomiting. I was thinking, what in the world? It's like stroke. It's like I can go ahead and say, well, I'd rather live with allergy than a stroke. You know what I mean? So it seemed like the side effects were worse than the benefit. And so when you look at something that is going to benefit, you don't look at just what's the benefits, but what's also the side effects. So the thing that why I would not promote these is because the contamination of water. I remember in 2015, I got to Malaysia. When I got to Malaysia, one of the things that I saw there was that on the news, not a how do you say public news, but private news, was saying that Fukushima had just had a spill of toxic waste, and it was millions and millions of gallons were being poured into the ocean. A few months later, I followed up on that. The U.S. was complaining to Japan. And the reason why they were complaining was because the toxic waste was so much. Now think about how far Japan is. It was affecting the waters of the U.S. So I decided to look it up again, and guess what? They still have not fixed the problem. From 2015, gallons of toxic waste and radioactive waste has been being poured into the ocean every day. So water contamination, toxins, heavy metals. I'm going to talk about toxins if we have time, if we don't. But there's toxins, there's aluminum, mercury. One of the ways that you can get mercury into your body is by eating fish. Lead as well. There's an increase in diseases in fishes. Fish have an increased rate of cancer. Now, fishes are having cancer and other diseases. But here's the thing. Did you know that even in the United States, even in the U.S., at least from my understanding, there is no standard for fish. In other words, we have no standard to check if this fish is safe to eat. It's just passed on. There's independent companies or independent organizations that voluntarily say, hey, our fish is good. But when it comes to the U.S., they don't check if it's sick, if it's polluted, contaminated, toxins. It's just go. So that's why I would not promote fish when it comes to trying to get your omega-3s, because you take your omega-3s and then you'll get some mercury. It's just counterintuitive. You're just going ahead and fighting against yourself. It's folic acid. Now this is another supplement that I got for my wife, because folic acid, if you lack, well, let me tell you what it is first right here. It's a vitamin B. Vitamin B, it's also known as folate, so don't think it's different. Folic acid and folate are the same thing, just the way that it's derived. That's the only difference, but pretty much it has the same function. So people that have a low level of folic acid have an increase of depression and Alzheimer's. Folic acid, maybe it's in here. Yeah, it is in here. The reason why I gave my wife folic acid when she was pregnant was because for the unborn fetus, it can develop heart disease, stroke, and spinal defects. So two of the things that I gave, I mean, if you're going to take anything from here today, if you're not struggling with mental health, with depression, for those that just walked in, we're talking about how to combat depression. If you don't, but let's say you care about your baby, you plan to get pregnant one day, or you plan to have a child, omega-3 helps develop the brain. People that lack in omega-3 have a hard time developing, or babies developing the frontal part of their brain, the frontal lobe. And folic acid, babies can be deformed when they're born. Heart disease, stroke, and spinal cord. Now here's what's interesting though. These are the popular drugs that you take, the ones that are famous. If you're depressed, someone will put you on Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, and more, right? If you lack folic acid and you're struggling with depression, guess what? These drugs will have no effect on you. Isn't that interesting? So you're depressed and you go to the doctor says, here, take this, but your problem is that you didn't have enough folic acid. He gives you the drug, it won't work. So these are important things. So how do you get folic acid? Pretty much, I didn't put it on here, but dark leafy green vegetables have folic acid. Chickpeas, black eye, cowpeas, lentils, red kidney beans, okra pods. This is how you get your folic acid. Vitamin B12. This one's important, especially for those people that are practicing plant-based diets. But people that have low levels of vitamin B12 can lead to poor coordination, Also, forgetfulness. Maybe someone here forgets a lot. It's like, oh man, lupa lagi. I remember that there was a girl, we would always talk to her, and she would always say, lupa lagi? Lupa lagi? And I asked my wife, what does that mean, lupa lagi? She said, oh, I forgot again. And she would say that like 10 times a day. I was like, man, this girl needs some vitamin B12. Something is wrong with this girl. But vitamin B12, people that have low levels of vitamin B12 can struggle with depression. Same thing with folic acid and omega-3s, okay? So people with low levels of B12 often are misdiagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So let me tell you this. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. But I'm just telling you the research that I found. Do you know that there are people that are, go to the doctor and they say, hey, you have Alzheimer's disease. Well, forgetfulness, right? Lack of coordination. They start forgetting stuff, acting a little bit strange. Well, here's the thing. When you get older, it is common for the older people to begin to decrease their ability, the stomach decreases the ability to absorb nutrition. And when it begins to lack, or let's say it doesn't matter how much food you take in, but if your stomach stops absorbing well vitamins, then you begin to have a deficiency. And often people that are older have a lack of vitamin B12. So if you lack vitamin B12, what are you going to do? Well, vitamin B12 is hard if you're plant-based, so you actually just have to buy food like cereals. They're usually fortified with B12. As well with yeast flakes, you can get this at Club Sehat, right? Club Sehat, yeast flakes. This is the way that I like to eat it, with yeast flakes and soy milk and cereal, because I like cereal, right? But some people don't have that, or they don't like this. You can go ahead and just buy vitamin B12. They're cheap. So I put vitamin B12 supplements. Now, you can get vitamin B12 from liver. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's cow liver. You can get it from beef. You can get it from egg. If you eat a whole egg, it also has vitamin B12. You can also get some omegas. Please don't confuse omega-3s with omega-6 and omega-9. They're totally different. So there's studies that show that the higher you have of omega-6 and the lower of omega-3, you're more prone to get depression. So what we're aiming for is omega-3. What we're aiming for is vitamin B12, folic acid, and tryptophan. But why didn't I mention beef? Remember, our principle that we're going by is to make sure that we get the benefit without any side effects. And we're going to be talking about that in a bit. Why am I not promoting the beef? Why am I not promoting the fish? But here comes to our next thing: animal protein and early puberty. This is from Depression: The Way Out, on a study, commenting on a study, girls who are at the middle of their puberty phase. In other words, girls that started going through puberty by the age of 11 or younger have an increased risk of depression. So one of the ways that you can see if a young lady is going to struggle with depression, you look at when she started her menstrual cycle. And the younger they start their menstrual cycle, the more likely that they're going to be struggling with depression. It increases. It doesn't mean that 100% sure you're going to have depression. It just means that you have an increased chance of going through depression. Well, here's a study. They checked on average which ladies went through their menstrual cycles earlier. On an average, Japan, look at Japan. Japan wins. The ladies, on average, they start their menstruation cycle at age 17. What about U.S.? U.S. girls started there on average, so that means it can be younger or older, 12 years old. So in the U.S., ladies are experiencing their first menstrual cycle at 12 or younger, around that age. So they were thinking, why is it that ladies in the U.S. are having their menstrual cycle or going through puberty a lot earlier than Japan? Here's what they found. A lower amount of animal protein in the diet, especially before adolescence, seemed to promote later puberty. So the more animal protein you have in your diet, specifically, if I'm not mistaken, from 3 to 5, study found that the higher animal protein intake at ages 3 to 5, the earlier the first menstrual period will begin. So in other words, the study found is that the more animal protein that you're taking, the more likely that you're going to have your menstrual cycle earlier, which you're most likely to have depression. That's the reason why I didn't promote beef and so on and so forth. It says here, girls that consume higher amounts of vegetable protein at age 3 to 5 have a much later onset of menstruation. So being on a plant-based diet, it helps you to push back your menstrual cycle. So this is I want to kind of continue. This is bonus. I'm going to be finishing pretty soon. And then I'd like to have a discussion with you guys. But girls that take more animal protein are more likely to have depression, not because meat causes depression. It's because it sets off your, it helps you to have puberty earlier, which goes ahead and leads into higher risk of depression, okay? So I want to make sure that that's clear. I didn't say meat will give you depression. That's not what I said. But here's an interesting study. This is something that I threw in just as a bonus. We're going to talk about Nobel Prizes. I thought that this was interesting, that there has only been one psychiatrist since 1887. Only one psychiatrist has ever won the Nobel Prize. What did he discover? He discovered that there is a link between mental health and inflammation. We're going to say depression. So somehow what you eat will affect your mental health. And he got a Nobel Prize for that. It was first noted in 1887. And that's it. No other psychiatrist has ever won a Nobel Prize. So what did he discover? Let's look at what he discovered, and let's look at some of the recent experiments that they're doing. It says that we can now induce depression. So if I want to give you depression today, like this, I can. Well, how do you do that? How can I induce depression in someone? We can give interferons for certain cancer or chronic infections, right? So here's something like how they treat it or how they help people. And when they did this, 50% go into major depression. How do they do that? So just giving a vaccine can cause enough inflammation to trigger depression symptoms. So if you can increase inflammation in the body, you can increase depression. Taken together, these studies are strongly suggestive that inflammation being a causative factor of mood symptoms. So how can I give someone depression? Increase inflammation in the body, and you can increase depression. Now, notice this. 43,000 women without depression, okay, were followed. They were along with their diet. So this is a huge study for about a dozen years. So that's just 12 years to see who became depressed, okay? So they didn't have depression. None of these women had depression. They're looking at their diets, and it was those that ate more inflammatory diet pattern. So what is an inflammatory? Look at this. It's even inflamed here. So what is an inflammatory diet? Let's look at that. Characterized by soda, refined grains, that's like sugars, and meat. This is an inflammatory diet, suggesting that chronic inflammation may be underlying the association between diet and depression. So if you want, there was even a study, I thought that this was fascinating. They had people that they would eat meat on the spot, and within 30 minutes, inflammation went up, and their mood changed. Within 30 minutes. The most anti-inflammatory diet is a plant-based diet. Now, notice this, which can cut C-reactive protein levels by 30%. So you're at a high state of inflammation, and you can cut your inflammation, and you can cut this by 30% within only 2 weeks of going on a plant-based diet. Perhaps because of the anti-inflammatory propensities of antioxidants. So that's the reason why I'm promoting plant-based when we're talking about how do you get your tryptophan, how do you get your omega-3s, how do you get your folic acid. Now, I've had a real experience with this. I had a big friend, a very big friend, and he loved eating meat. He was on the keto diet, where he said, well, I want to lose a lot of weight, so I'm going to eat nothing but animal fat. no carbohydrates. And he went on just eating a steak every single day and salmon, everything that was high in fat. And he developed a sickness. The doctor told him, hey, you're pretty swollen. And I need to do a surgery. They needed to fix his, if I'm not mistaken, his hip. I forgot which one it was, but it might have been his hip. And so they needed to cut a piece of his bone. And the doctor said, I can't perform surgery on you. And the reason why I can't perform surgery on you is because you're too swollen. That's what he said. In other words, for you to lose or to not be so swollen or inflamed, you need to get off the meat for a few weeks and then come back, and then I can go ahead and perform surgery on you. And sure enough, he did that and he was okay. But what I'm saying, that was the first time that I heard about that. It was in Mexico. My friend went to get his surgery in Mexico, and the doctor told him that. And I was like, wow, I never heard of that. I don't think that I was vegan at that time. But anyway, I thought that was fascinating because I was reading these studies, and sure enough. But here's the thing, friends. I want you to know that this is a proof for intelligent design. And one of the reasons why I say that, it's because our body has not learned how to cope with a meat-eating diet. To this day, our body is still struggling that when we eat meat, and there's heart disease, and there's depression, and there's, hypertension, all these other things. But that's not the point. But I want you to see what Jesus says. He says, these things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, that your joy might be full. In other words, Jesus wants you to be full of joy or joyful. So why does God tell us things? It's not because he wants you to be sad or mad or angry or doesn't want you to be have any fun, but the reason why, it's because he wants you to be full of joy. Jesus said, I am come that they might have life, and that they might have life more abundantly. I mean, I always told my family, I would watch these documentaries or these talk shows where people were on their deathbed, or their brain was active, but their body wasn't able to move. And I said, if I ever in my life were to ever end up like that, where I can't talk and I'm just in a bed, I just pull the plug. I don't want to live like that. You're just surviving. Well, Jesus says, I came that I might give them life more abundantly. See, Jesus wants you to be joyful. Jesus wants you to have an abundant life. And Jesus gave us at the beginning the diet that we should be eating. What did he say? Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26. We were made intelligently. We have a design, and therefore we have a diet. And he says, God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in which is fruit for the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. That's an old English way of saying food. Someone was arguing with me saying, see, God gave us meat. Well, the context is fruits and trees and nuts, and it says for meat. That's an old English way of saying food. The Bible says, the Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord will give you grace and glory. Look at what it says. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. If God has withheld something from you, it's because it's not good. Yesterday, my son, we were outside playing with my dogs. I had a tennis ball, and I would throw the ball. And my dog would get it and bring it back. And that's one of the ways that I train him to bark and to bite and to do all the things that sit and jump and whatever. Now, and we have a little field, so I'm throwing the ball, and there we have lights. But the lights are small. They're like this. And this one time we were cutting a tree. The tree hit the lamp, and it shattered the glass. And for some reason, we forgot to pick it up. And there you have the shattered glass. And my son, as he's walking around our orchard, walking around all the trees and stuff, he sees that, and I tell him, he picks up the glass. And I said, don't touch it. And he said, okay, he puts it down. Now, my son has a funny thing, something that he does that I don't like. He goes, Eenie? No. And then he touches it. Eenie? No touch, yeah? Eenie? And I'm like, don't do that. I said, don't touch it. Eenie? No. He goes like that. So I told him, I got him, I said, don't touch it anymore. I told him, don't touch it. So I'm playing with my dog. As I'm playing with my dog, my son sees that I'm not looking. He goes and he touches it again. And then I kneel down and I said, son, I told you don't touch it. He goes, and then he doesn't touch it. No, yeah. No touch. Okay. Playing with my dog, and I have this game where I tell my dog, stay here, put your head down. I hide the ball, and then I said, find it. And then it has to go look for where I hit the ball. So I go to tell my dog, you're going to hide here. I'm giving my dog the instructions. And when I turn my back, I'm quite a bit of a distance from here, probably to the wall back there. My son sees that I'm not paying attention, so he goes to the glass and he picks it up. So I hit him in the hand, and I hit him hard. And he says, Ini, no. Now, why do I forbid him to play with the glass? It's broken glass. It's not a glass that it's intact. It's broken glass. Why wouldn't I allow him to do that? Why would I go as far as to hit him in the hand? It's because I know that he can cut himself. He was in the restroom one day and I left my razor there, and for some reason my wife was teaching him to wash his hands, and he went and grabbed the razor and he pulled and he sliced his finger open. I'd rather hit my son in the hand and tell him, you are not allowed to touch this, and make him scared, than to him cut himself and have to take him to the hospital. In the same way, friends, God tells you the things that Jesus told us is so that we may be full of joy. He wants us to have life more abundant. And if there's something that is not good, he will withhold it from you. Okay, friends, we've run out of time. I know that we've only talked about the things that are not changeable, things that are fixed, the unchangeable factors, the diet. We're going to get into social factors maybe next week. Social factors have an influence on depression. But so far, does anybody have any questions or any comments before we close out? Uncle Thomas gave me the 5-minute mark. I was planning for 10 minutes of discussion. I'm sorry I took too much of your time. Anybody has any questions or comments? There is a microphone should be there that you can use. Comments, questions? We're good? Clear? Easy to understand? Right? So the things that we learn, why sometimes the brain can malfunction. One of them is diet-related, lack of omega-3, lack of folic acid, lack of serotonin, which you can get from tryptophan, right? Those are the things that we learned today. We focused on using not animal products, but plant products. The reason why is because animal products tend to make your body more inflammatory, which leads to depression.